It is without a doubt that JoJo's Bizarre Adventure has a vast presence in the LGBT anime and manga fan base. The majority of my fellow queer friends who are invested in manga have read and actively continue to enjoy JoJo, some of them outright identifying with particular characters, sequences, or pairings in the series, and many of them partaking in the fandom culture surrounding it. JoJo has, rather infamously, had a large gay following even since the early parts, spawning hundreds of fan works centered around the gay pairings. It's not always the case of Fujoshi creating yaoi works either, which are usually made for and by heterosexual women. Oftentimes, it's actual queer people creating content to be consumed by other queer people. This is evident in both fan works, old and new. I remember being a young anime fan exploring his identity for the first time. I remember searching for those like myself in media, and among the slew of heinous yaoi series geared towards straight women and not actual gay men, I found people recommending me JoJo over and over again. Though at the time I was more fond of gay men who resembled my scrawny teenage self, I now know exactly what they were thinking in suggesting it to me. While JoJo never necessarily features any explicitly stated major LGBT characters, oftentimes it feels like it does. Some, myself included, would call the bulk of this queer baiting, while others would simply call it queer coding or gay subtext. A lot of the popular pairings in JoJo have a good sense of realism to them, as opposed to the weird framing of gay relationships in most yaoi and yuri series. There's something very familiar and relatable when Abachio says he feels at peace with Bruno. Something very charming in the friendship between Okuyasu and Josuke, which at times can feel more like a budding high school romance. Please note that a lot of gay people experienced high school romance differently from their heterosexual peers due to the culture surrounding same-sex attraction. Simply to say, it's nice. The intimacy with which JoJo characters of the same sex interact is relatable in a way that a series written for and by gay people would be, as opposed to the oftentimes fetishistic yaoi and yuri genres. That being said, there is one relationship that stands out, even amongst the sea of Hoye peppered throughout the series. While it is a pairing that I think has a lot of cute fan art, and I don't have anything against, it's not one I'm invested in. I have plenty of those of my own. Even amongst the scenes of Dio professing his respect for Jojo and only Jojo, Abdul and Polnareff's rather affectionate hug in the Stardust Crusaders OVA, and everything surrounding sorbet and gelato, these two particularly stand out. I am, of course, talking about Joseph Joestar and Caeser Zeppeli of JoJo's Part 2. Now, before we get the whole they're just friends, yada yada, I'm not by any means denouncing their friendship, or the concept of friendship in general, nor am I suggesting you have to read them as a gay couple. I'm simply talking about my reading of them as a bisexual man myself. So to speak, I'm talking about battle tendency through a queer lens. Let's cut to the heart of things. Caeser and Joseph are romantically attracted to each other. Hopelessly so. Tragically so. It's pretty clear from my reading of the manga, and I'll show you exactly how I read it. From here on out, I will be discussing the key moments between the two of them in chronological order, and both analyzing the scenes as well as explaining their importance to the romantic narrative between Caeser and Joseph. From here on out, there won't be any more video feeds, so if you want to follow along with me in the manga, then I suggest starting at chapter 62, and then I believe Caeser dies in chapter 92, so you can follow along with individual scenes there. I will be calling attention to maybe one or two panels throughout this, but for the most part, the rest of this is just going to be a listening experience, so you can feel free to tab off and listen to this blankly. Let's dive in. Caesar's establishing scene has him sweet-talking some girl, while Joseph stands on, watching in horror. He's rather evidently revolted by Caesar's over-the-top attitude and cool guy persona, and quickly decides he hates him, and in his own words, hates guys like that. He quickly decides to intervene because Caeser is simply trying to get some action in kissing the girl, so it's assumed that he's doing it for the girl's decency. Except back in the introduction, Joseph was all about flipping some girls' skirts. Classy, Jojo. I'm not suggesting this is jealousy in the relationship so early on, but it's pretty damn noteworthy that Joseph goes ahead and gets flustered about something like this. Sure, picking fights seems very him, but getting bothered by some random dude sweet-talking a girl? Isn't the Joseph we've seen up until now a bit thicker skinned than that? I digress. We then get a quick battle between Joseph and Caeser that stems from Caesar's annoyance of this prideless brat, and Joseph's annoyance over being treated as such. Boys being boys, classic hotheads, and if Caesar was a girl, I'm pretty sure the narrative would already be treating him like a love interest, as we've seen time and time again with these haughty characters and rougher boys. The tsundere, so to speak. But I'll get to that. Joseph gets beat up by the girl that Caesar's been romancing, and there's some cool Jojo-style trickery. The fight's done. Not necessarily romantic. It's just some establishing shots to one of the most meaningful same-sex relationships in Jojo, however short-lived. We then see the Pillarmen getting up from their nap, and let's skip ahead to Joseph, Caesar, and Speedwagon all together. Joseph and Caesar are about to play cards, and both inwardly scheme about taking advantage of one another. They call one another out on their cheating and squabble. Quite frankly, it's kinda adorable. Caesar's friend Mark appears, and they begin to head to the site of the Pillarmen. When Mark talks about his girlfriend, Caesar asks if Joseph has one, and then makes fun of him, claiming that finding a girl who could tolerate his awful personality would be harder than locating the Loch Ness Monster. Ouch. They've just met, so this isn't romantic per se, but let's call it the start of their unresolved sexual tension, or UST. Again, this is pretty in line with the tsundere trope, and were they a guy and girl, this exchange would be treated like flirting. On my first and second read both, they read just as such to me. Now, fast forward. Mark dies a la Pillarmen, and so begins the first fight of the Pillarmen versus the heroes. We get this great picture of Caesar and Joseph. Subtext. Right. The battle grows dire, and Joseph both plays dead and begins running away, which makes Caesar lose all respect for him and denounce him. However, upon the realization Joseph's trying to save Speedwagon and himself, Caesar is impressed and, dare I say, enamored. He does care quite a bit about destiny and family and fate and the like, and looks a little more than starstruck upon the realization that Joseph does as well. Wham and AC/DC decide to fight Joseph when he's trained a month from now, and give him 2 wedding rings filled with poison, placed inside his body and unremovable. If he does not defeat them, the poison in the rings will bleed out and kill Joseph. If Joseph can defeat the Pillarmen, only then can he get the antidotes and drink them, nullifying the effects of the poison. It's pretty important to note the significance of the fact that in canon these rings are called wedding rings, and that that's not just some fandom joke or mistranslation. It's also very vital to note that the one placed by Wham is around Joseph's aorta, near his heart. That'll come up later. Back to the scene at hand. Joseph passes out and Caesar grips onto his unconscious body while reflecting on the situation at hand and deciding he will train with Joseph, all while donning a distinctly loving gaze. It is in this moment Caesar has fallen for Joseph. I'm pretty sure lots of people read them as an actual couple, but I always read them as 2 people who had a strong romantic investment in one another, but never really quite took the plunge. At the end of their first fight with the Pillarmen, I think that really marked Caesar's realization that he'd fallen for Joseph, even if he wasn't ready to confront that yet, or confess, or enter an actual functional relationship. Later, Joseph sees a doctor, gets a checkup, and Caesar expresses annoyance over the ordeal, boldly telling Jojo to get strong, take things seriously, and defeat the Pillarmen. Joseph makes jokes to deal with the otherwise horrifying situation, while Caesar seems to be contemplating if this is even the same guy from before. Every time Joseph jokes about the scenario, Caesar gets visibly flustered and angry, if he doesn't outright yell at Joseph. Clearly he's taking things very seriously. I find it akin to when my boyfriend is ill and jokes about his sickness while I chide him to be serious and not make such morbid jokes. So then we're introduced to a few concepts of Hamon and Lisa. For a month now, Joseph and Caesar are going to train and live together. Lisa takes them to her island and informs them that they must start from the beginning. She throws Joseph and Caesar to the bottom of a pillar covered in oil and forces them to climb to the top, something they can only do with Hamon. Immature jokes about metaphorical imagery aside, there's a lot of subtext to this scene as well. A good chunk of this montage is Caesar's internal monologue and his worries that Joseph can't do it or that he'll die. An earlier Caesar would mock him or express annoyance. His feelings have very clearly shifted. He's been moved. Even one of his first thoughts is that Jojo and he will starve. When did Jojo become part of the picture? Probably when he saved him, but there's something touching about all of it. You know, rescue romance and the like. Caesar, at the time, being more competent, spends his dialogue worrying over Joseph, while Joseph mostly yells about the actual act of climbing. When he's able to direct his ham on, Caesar dons an absolutely angelic smile, proud of Joseph. Sometime later, Caesar makes it to the top. Joseph is glad for him, but has to deal with the oil jet stream. Caesar awaits him tensely. Caesar worries Joseph will die in the oil jet stream, and looks utterly relieved when he comes out fine. His face is that of a girl who just found out her soldier husband is alive. There's a sort of passion in it. He reaches for Joseph and helps him up. Once again, he's really proud of him. If there was any skepticism about Caesar's feelings for Jojo before, this scene really crushed all those doubts out. So begins their month of training. Quick cut to this adorable little panel. Flash forward, Caesar is partaking in the final fight of his training, and Joseph makes battle with an impatient AC/DC. After his fight with Messina, Caesar uses his binoculars to immediately check up on Joseph, to which Messina shows amusement, and gives us this absolutely golden line. "You care more about whether that loudmouth passed his trial than you care about passing yours, Caesar?" To which Caesar brashly responds, "I've been able to make so much progress in these 20 days because I didn't want to lose to Jojo. Both Jojo and I will live through our battle with the three of them. I'll say it. Jojo may be loud and insolent, but at the core, he's got a heart of gold. How fucking romantic. How sweet." I've gotta say this. Sometimes Caesar leans so far into tsundere territory, I want to outright call him one. Though I'm hesitant, as the term is thrown around so frequently and loosely. But plenty of people have called him as such before, and he shows a lot of key characteristics of the classic sort. He is a defrosting ice king, so to speak, gradually warming up and letting the harsh side down in favor of a softer, more intimate side. It's charming and, dare I say, cute. Then Messina throws us this lovely little quip. "You may be terrible at making friends, but once you've found one, you fall harder than you do with girls." Caesar is our resident womanizer, and that gives this line a lot of heart. Let's move ahead to after the battle. Joseph has some cute and flirtatious exchange with Susie, and I was also charmed. However, I do feel some sort of annoyance over the fact that people can simply accept them with no on-screen development beyond that, and dismiss Caesar and Joseph's relationship in spite of the fact that they've had some equally, if not more flirtatious dialogue together. Again, I digress. They fight what's left of AC/DC, head off to Switzerland, and Caesar and Joseph fight. Not before the return of Stroheim in a skirmish with cars, during which Joseph refers to Caesar as "my little Caesar." The fight plays out like a lover's spat, with them getting uncomfortably close and very heated. Of course, it's their lives and familial pride on the line, but the way Joseph gets oh so worried about Caesar is, again, sweet. Yes, you get worried about a friend like this in this scenario, but just as much you would with a lover. We all know how the rest of this plays out. Caesar goes his own way and fights Wham on his own. Joseph and Lisa follow, a little too late. With the last energy in him, Caesar takes the ring from Wham and leaves it in a bubble behind for Joseph, the lip ring with the antidote. Wham allows it, and leaves. The ring with the antidote. The ring that will break the spell of the wedding ring. The one that will save Joseph's heart. If that's not symbolism, I don't know what is. Up until this point, much of the conversation has been surrounding Caesar's feelings towards Joseph, and for good reason. We just don't see enough of Joseph's feelings towards Caesar in early battle tendency to comment on them from a romantic perspective. Remember how earlier I said Caesar was attracted to Joseph romantically but probably didn't realize it? I see the scene in which he takes the ring as the moment that he does realize those feelings. But when does Joseph do the same? As he lets out a devastated cry over his fallen comrade, shouting "Caesar!" over his friend's fallen body. Later, it's Caesar's headband that helps him defeat Wham, and Joseph only drinks the antidote after defeating Wham in Caesar's honor. Joseph expresses his emotions a bit differently than Caesar. While Caesar is all internal monologues, Joseph primarily expresses the rawest of his emotions with open, unabashed gestures. While he doesn't necessarily profess them verbally, Joseph's feelings are very clear. When he likes someone, he teases them, cries over them, and protects them. The reason we don't get as much deeper insight onto Joseph's feelings on Caesar like we do the other way around is because Joseph is constantly being swept up in the currents of the story, as opposed to Caesar, who's given much more breathing room to introspect. That being said, Joseph gradually warming up to Caesar always read to me as an open-hearted and dense boy warming up further and further to someone he's not quite aware he's in love with. We never truly get to see the impact of Caesar's death on Joseph in the long run, but I'm sure if we got Jojo the in-between or something along those lines, it would be as tragic as all the fanfictions make it out to be. However, Caesar's impact on Joseph can never be understated. Joseph has become far more mature and level-headed, and he's also experienced his first loss through Caesar. It's safe to say Caesar will always be with Joseph. So, what's the significance of all of this? I'm not going to get into the logistics of why representation matters or is important, and this was not some sort of massive essay making an attempt to convince people who didn't already appreciate the romantic feelings of Joseph Joestar and Caesar Zeppeli to begin shipping them. This was simply my take on what I read as a gay romance from my perspective as a man who's attracted to other men. If this helped you better appreciate the two, I'm really glad, and if you didn't previously read them as gay but are now beginning to, then I will be absolutely over the moon. Regardless of whether or not it was Iraqi's intent to depict Caesar and Joseph romantically, scores of people have come to the conclusion that they do experience romantic attraction to one another over the course of the story, and this has brought many people great joy. Caesar and Joseph, if written as a gay couple, are pretty damn well written. It's rare we get a story in anime or manga about a homosexual couple where romance isn't the focal point of the story, but is still important enough to get its own subplot. Caesar and Joseph can easily be taken as a case study on how to write a same-sex relationship well. If just prior to Caesar's death we had gotten an "I love you, Jojo," or if after Caesar's death we had gotten a verbal confirmation of Joseph's feelings for Caesar, I'd probably think it was close to, if not straight up perfect. Caesar and Joseph's in-your-face way of dealing with one another, yet at the same time shy opening up, is rather reminiscent of quite a few of my relationships in middle and high school, as I was exploring my sexuality both as a budding adult and as a young queer person in a largely heterosexual society. I'm sure a younger me would have seen myself in Joseph and Caesar, and I can say with certainty that an older me looks on them the same way I would fondly remember my earlier dating years. There's plenty of Jojo fans who feel the same way. At the end of the day, I really fucking appreciate a well-written queer romance, and Caesar and Joseph, quite frankly, are one of the best, even if that's not what the author was quite going for. Thank you for watching. This is the first of probably, hopefully, a series of analysis videos regarding JoJo's Bizarre Adventure and possibly other series as well. I'm just testing the waters with this, but if you like this video, I'd appreciate it if you spread it around to your friends or left a comment about how you felt about it. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys again soon.